Her bio is in the program. But one of the things that we've been able to do, and it's one of the objectives of our organization, when we invite a keynote speaker, we try to pull those folks that have made a significant impact in our community when they were here in Buffalo. They go on their merry ways, but they stay connected to the city. And we try to invite folks that fit that type of description. And when we were talking over with our board, our executive board, regarding our keynote speaker for this year, she came up #1 on the list. She does not need any introduction because, like I said, her bio is in the program, but she was very instrumental in bringing 3 organizations together to what today is known as Hispanos Unidos de Buffalo. Last night when I was having dinner with her, we were talking about those days. And she really brought me up to date on how all that happened and who were the key players that had a lot to do with that. So with that, I'd like to introduce to you Sarah Norat-Phillips.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to read this without my reader's, age, but I'm going to try. Yeah, I give it to you. Thank you. Good morning. Buenos dias. Thank you, Cass. I'd like to welcome our distinguished guests. Hey, I can do it without the glasses. Friends, family, supportive community, what an honor it is to be here this morning. I was sincerely touched when Casimiro reached out to me about speaking at this breakfast. It's been so long since I was truly active in Buffalo's Latino community. It humbled me to know that I would even be remembered after almost 20 years away working and living in Michigan. And it feels great to be here, to be home, to be back as part of a community that I love. So gracias to Cass, gracias to the Hispanic, Heritage Council. Thank you for all the tremendous work that you are doing. The Niagara Corridor project is outstanding. The archival work that you're doing is so important. I really appreciate and know that the history of the community is in very, very good hands, so thank you for that. Of course, over the years, I've come back many times to visit with friends and family. My daughter's father is Juan Phillips. Many of you know him, a native Buffalonian who still serves as part of the Buffalo Police Force. My dearest friend and sister, Lorna C. Hill, who joined me here today, still lives here after 38 years, still serves as the artistic visionary for Ujima Theater Company, and she remains a critical community voice. Lorna and I raised our children together like siblings, regardless of time or distance, because that's what family does. It gathers, and it nurtures, and it helps us to lift each other. For me, family is the only institution that has never failed me. It has remained my rock steady, even when there were turbulent times. Familia. I was born to Puerto Rican parents and raised in the largely African-American Fort Greene projects of Brooklyn. I was nurtured by both communities, and much is owed for all the ways that they guided me in my life. Now, back then, for any of you who go back and forth from New York, Brooklyn, downtown Brooklyn was not the Mecca that it is today of new development and affluence and gentrification. And when I go to visit Brooklyn now, I can barely recognize the very places that I grew up in. That's a different speech for a different time, but it has relevance today. I have two older sisters, both of whom I'm very proud to say are very accomplished women. My oldest sister started as an ESL teacher. Eventually, she acquired her PhD in education and just recently retired as a principal from an elementary school in New York City. No easy task, not an easy job. My middle sister is the head of the talent acquisition and human resources for one of the largest healthcare systems in New York State. So why do I tell you these details about my siblings? Well, mostly because we weren't special. When I was born, we didn't have anything special. My father bagged groceries at the local vegetable market. My mother was a seamstress at the garment factory. They were just poor working folks, but my parents worked hard, and they believed in us. They were people of strong faith and of stronger conviction. They taught us by their example about the importance of family, of education, of faith, of community. Most of my friends never made it out of those projects, never made it out of that cycle of poverty, an experience that may not be too different from many of you sitting in this room today. But we did make it out. We did break the cycle, and I've always chosen to believe it was for a reason, that it was for a greater good, a purpose. And so I think about purpose a lot, and what does that mean? What does it mean to have a purpose? The Maharishi Yogi described the purpose of life as the expansion of happiness. Pablo Picasso said the meaning of life is to find your purpose, and then the purpose of life is to give it away. I believe that the purpose of my life so far has not been just to find personal happiness and individual success, but also to be creative, productive, and useful, to make a difference in the world, to leave the places where I have lived and where my life's journey has taken me better because I had been there, because I had helped to create a better community. These are lessons I learned as a child, lessons I was taught by my parents, the lessons I hope I've passed on to my daughter Carmen, who's also with me today, and some of you in the room remember her as a toddler with ponytails. She's completing her PhD at NYU this year. And so I hope that I've also passed those kinds of lessons on to the many other young people that I've worked with or spoken to or touched along the way. I am ever grateful to Buffalo's Latino community, a community that held me up during the most formative young adult years, a community that afforded me the opportunity to develop my own leadership potential, a community that in 1977 opened its arms and its homes to a brash New York City outsider with a bit of a chip on her shoulder. To Ana Cotón, Doña Irene, who brought me arroz con gandules con pollo guisado to Buffalo State because esa pobrecita está viviendo solita out there with the gringos at Buffalo State. She clearly was in need of a home-cooked meal. Those two early giants, and I mean giants of this community, showed me that by those simple acts of kindness, we all are part of the same community. We really are responsible for one another. To Jose Pizarro, Alberto Capas, Rudy Santos, Susie Gonzalez, Mike Rivera, who allowed a young, inexperienced college student to join their efforts in community building at what was then P.R.C.C, the Puerto-Rican Chicano Committee. To Carlos Mendoza and Emilio Fuentes and the now defunct Hispanic Media Group for their unwavering support of my personal goal to become a part of the broadcasting industry, for creating Pueblo Buffalo, a weekly public affairs show dedicated to the issues, the concerns, the celebrations of Buffalo's Latino community at WKBW-TV. To Raul Rusi and Andy Garcia, Paul Volsi, Chito Olivencia, Johnny Sanabria. And all of us who met every week for almost a year, negotiating, building trust, ultimately hammering out the agreement that would result in the creation of H.U.B, Hispanos Unidos of Buffalo, a broad-spectrum Hispanic-driven community service institution that still exists today, more than 20 years later, advocating for and meeting the needs of those community members who still remain the most vulnerable. And finally, to La Liga, mis queridas hermanas of the Hispanic Women's League. And those original meetings huddled in the living room of Carmen Facio's house. To Margarita Santiago, Dr. Mendel, Sonia Davila, Carmen Melendez, Lilian Fuentes, Carmen del Valle, Maria Rosa, all those other women who recognized that in a culture that is filled to the brim with machismo, our voice, a woman's voice, needed to be heard, needed to be included, needed to be recognized, and not just in the kitchen or in the bedroom, but in the boardroom. The years have passed. The city of Buffalo has had its fair share of very well-documented ups and downs, and so, of course, has Buffalo's Latino community. And this community now finds itself at a crossroads, inside of a city that is actively reinventing itself. The challenge, of course, is taking advantage of new opportunities as they arise, if they arise. The challenge is in having the resources, the leadership, the focus, the tenacity to participate in Buffalo's reinvention. And more importantly, having the courage to demand access, to demand egress into that participation if it is not offered. My friends, we are living in a time when frontline communities have never been more at risk. The threat is unprecedented and very real. It is indeed a very dangerous juncture in the history of our nation. We see and hear the headlines every day about a current federal government that is actively and aggressively attempting to dismantle or defund the very health, human, environment, education, and economic development services that this community and every poor, working class, and middle class community in America needs if we're going to continue making progress. They are trying literally to turn back the hands of time. And we, collectively, simply cannot allow that to happen. We need to defend our principles and our values. We need to defend our civil rights and our human rights. Because I believe that if we don't, if we stand by and we do nothing, then this community and this state and this country, maybe even this world, will get swallowed up by the chaos that is coming. Martin Luther King once said, if I cannot do great things, I can still do small things in a great way. And so today I ask, what are you doing? What are you doing to make a difference? There are so many things that each of us can do, both big and small things, to make a difference. Coming here today makes a difference. Supporting the work of the council makes a difference. Participating in your community when they need you makes a difference. Each of us has the responsibility to find our own way, our own talent, our own path, no matter how small, and then contribute to the preservation of the greater good. And then each of us has to make up our minds to make a commitment and get on that path today. Because this time, mis amigos, my friends, this time silence is not an option. So let's talk a little bit about Buffalo. Wow. Talk about reinvention. When I left this city, it was just a shell of its former self. The collapse of the automotive and steel industries had devastated the area. Unemployment was at record high levels. Schools were experiencing a debilitating budget crisis. Local government was in disarray. The impact of the very depressed economy visibly affected every neighborhood. Even the bulletproof Elmwood Business District showed signs of struggle. And as I recall, when I left, it looked like there was some hope peeking through on the horizon. There was this concept floating around about building a medical corridor. There were some conversations about what are we going to do with the waterfront? We really need to do something about the waterfront. Financial institutions looked like they were trying to come back to health, and there were new, untested voices getting elected to serve in local government. It started to feel like maybe the worst of it was over, and in many ways it was. You can't see pictures of Buffalo's waterfront and downtown districts from 20 years ago versus today, and not marvel at the absolutely incredible transformations that have undergone. Clear evidence of reinvestment, redevelopment, new construction, successful business all around. The internationally recognized medical corridor is a reality. The Elmwood and the Delaware districts are thriving again. And as an outsider, it appears to me that even some of the smaller neighborhoods are finally reaping the benefits of these development efforts. Business development up along the riverside, Grant Street, Niagara Street, those have stood out to me because those are the neighborhoods that I tend to frequent when I would come back and visit and make visits to the city. Of course, I am going to say one thing that concerned me and became a national discussion, and that really is the problem that Buffalo still has concerning the future of public education. Most notably, an embarrassing leadership problem at the school board level, something, in my opinion, that really needs to be corrected, and the sooner the better. However, I digress. I've lived in the Detroit, Michigan area since leaving Buffalo. It too was a city that many left for dead following the collapse of the American automotive industry. And I've watched Detroit return to life, slowly but steadily over the years, using many of the same community wealth building tactics, tools, and processes that I'm glad to see are available here in Buffalo. Collaborations, cooperatives, collectives. Community-based economic development projects, community-based economic development projects are the means through which high-risk and economically depressed communities are successfully reinventing themselves all across this country. And in my opinion, it is the only way that Buffalo's Latino community will survive and thrive into the new millennium. And in order for this to happen, Latino community leadership must make the effort and the commitment to ensure that the community always has a place at the table when these projects are being discussed and designed and developed, because if we don't have a place at the table, we will not eat from the table. That's just how it works. The best explanation I have heard for this process that I call community economic development is as follows. It's the use of local resources to enhance economic opportunities while improving social conditions in a sustainable way. Community economic development is very different from private sector economic development and conventional economic development, because at its core, community economic development recognizes that the problems facing disadvantaged communities, like poverty and unemployment, job loss, must be addressed holistically as part of the solution. You can't have one without the other. In other words, community economic development is about transforming the lives of people, not just transforming the economy. And that is why these projects have been successful in cities of sizes all around the country. A couple of quick examples. One, right down the road, Ibero-American Development Corporation in Rochester. They've started a program that purchases, renovates, and then manages buildings and affordable housing units. Their latest project is a 25-unit apartment building for low-income people with disabilities. This corporation is affiliated with the Ibero-American Action League, which many of you, of course, know, as a broad human rights service agency that also offers entrepreneurial assistance to community members who want to start their own businesses. Then there's City Seed, which is in New Haven, Connecticut, also a community with 33% Latino population. And City Seed operates 5 inner-city farmers markets, including a mobile market that delivers fresh produce to the disabled and to senior citizens, and offers a double SNAP coupon to help stretch dollars for those who are on limited incomes. Recently, City Seed also opened up a commercial kitchen space designed to help incubate small food businesses, and they're offering hands-on food education programs. One last example I'm a little more familiar with is You Snap Back, which is in Detroit, which is where I live. Stands for United Streets Networking and Planning, Building a Community. This community economic development project is actually a consortium of 7 community-based organizations and 4 business associations. And the consortium has a housing subsidiary which operates a neighborhood home repair program. They have helped to develop 100 block clubs, organize educational forums and neighborhood cleanups. They have rehabilitated over 500 homes, and they have built 130 new and affordable homes in communities that have been neglected. And like these 3 projects, there are many, scores, all over the country. Buffalo is actually fortunate. It has several community economic development projects already in place, some of which are just beginning to have a measurable impact on their communities, and others which have been around for some time. A couple of those highly regarded newer programs are Reuse on the east side, which is tackling the task of demolishing abandoned properties. How many of you know that we have a few abandoned properties in the city of Buffalo? But they're attempting to do it in an environmentally safe way, and then recycling those materials, and then engaging the community that lives around that property on a positive, productive way to use the now vacant land, like a community garden. And then there's Push Buffalo. I was very glad to hear that they actually had a table here today. Stands for People United for Sustainable Housing. They are doing some very exciting and commendable work over on Buffalo's west side. First, with the purchase and the renovation of school, I believe it's 77. The development of programs dedicated to the creation of green jobs, green housing alternatives, community organizing, youth community services. If this community, if we as Latinos are not actively engaging in these kinds of collaborations and efforts to build a more sustainable, environmentally conscious, forward-thinking community, then we're going to miss the boat. I really encourage you to take some time, just walk around, look around at what is happening in these once forgotten neighborhoods that we still refer to as ours for now. The times, they are a-changing. And as a community, we collectively need to recognize and find the hidden value in our community that others are discovering every day And then we have to restake our claim in the reinvention of Buffalo. Or in time, it's going to be possible that we're going to look up, and we have been moved out, and the community that we love is lost to us forever. Collaborations, cooperatives, collectives, they are our future. I urge you to figure out how to get involved in these ongoing efforts so that Buffalo's Latino community leaves that legacy of sustainability and economic and environmental health to our children and to their children for many years to come. I'm going to close my comments today with a short story that Kaz told me I had to tell. It remains as relevant today as it did when I lived through this process almost 30 years ago. It was a very difficult time in Buffalo. Steel and automotive industries had gone bust. Public money to support small community-based organizations was drying up fast. We had no voice, no representation in local government, and the late 70s and early 80s drug culture had really taken its toll on the Latino community. At the time, there were several community-based organizations serving that community, each one fighting for their share of the same dwindling pot of money. The three most prominent organizations at the time were P.R.C.C, P.R.C, and Alternativa. And eventually it became apparent that the only way the community was going to get what it needed was for those three independent organizations to deconstruct themselves, shutter their doors, and merge into a single community-based organization. And this act would finally leverage the respect, the funding, and the political influence that was long overdue and very much needed in order to truly deliver new and improved services to the community. And so, for almost a year, maybe it was more, Johnny, a committee with representatives of each of those organizations met weekly to hammer out the structure and the policies of the newly merged organization that is now Hispanos Unidos de Buffalo. And let me tell you, those were not easy meetings. There were a lot of egos involved. There was a lot of history involved. There was a lot of turf protection going on. But through it all, eventually the desire to deliver true community service won over, and H.U.B was created. And congratulations, Gino. I hear you're doing a terrific job. Several of the architects of that merger, of those meetings, is here today, and I'd ask that they stand up and be recognized for their courage and for their leadership. Johnny, Chito, Jose, I saw you here. Who else? I mentioned more. What we did back then was no small task. And I share with you this story on this occasion because that is what it still takes. It takes vision. It takes courage. It takes commitment, leadership, the willingness to collaborate collectively for the greater good. That's how communities survive, and that's how the Latino community will secure its place in the future of this great city. I want to thank you for inviting me to be your keynote speaker this morning. It has been both an honor and a pleasure.
You can have a seat. Sara, there's a lot of history in our community, and last night at dinner we were talking a lot about it. And that's what the primary objective of our organization is to preserve that history and make sure that the history is correct. And as a token of appreciation, we'd like to present you this, this buffalo. And it says, with our appreciation and admiration of your dedication to the Western New York community, Sarah Norat-Phillips, keynote speaker, community breakfast today's date, on behalf of the Hispanic Heritage Council and the entire Latino community and all those here present, I'd like to present this to you. Thank you very much. And we'll go on with the program. Samantha.